Thanks for listening to the Media People Podcast, lively and insightful chats with the people who power the media industry. I'm your host, Victor Genova. For more episodes, you can go to mediapeople.ca or subscribe wherever you get podcasts. Views expressed by participants are personal. You'll be hard-pressed to find a more eclectic resume than Ryan Ladisa's. Ryan has worked in broadcast, out-of-home, digital, programmatic, and creative. He's worked for agencies, big corporate conglomerates, and specialized ad tech veterans. He slung media space, sold cross-platform solutions, led departments hunting for the latest innovations, and helped innovative companies find their foothold in the Canadian market. And we can also add entrepreneur to the list. Ryan was Freshii franchisee number 1. This was back when Freshii was known by its former name, Lettuce Eatery. Ryan Ladisa stops by to chat about growing up in Toronto, studying creative advertising at Seneca College, and his extensive media career that spans both the agency and vendor side of the business.
DAX is an unbiased audio platform serving inventory across streaming music, podcasts, audio and articles, and soon to be released audio and gaming. We're a huge scale partner in the marketplace in Canada. We also have businesses in the US and in the UK. We're corporately owned by Global, who's a huge radio player in the UK and Europe, and a substantial out-of-home player in the market as well.
All right, Ryan, let's go back to the beginning. Where are you from?
I am born and raised in Toronto. Went to school in Scarborough, East York, and then went to Seneca College and decided early on that advertising was my passion from a career perspective. And so embarked on the ad industry after working at numerous jobs in the service industry and in all kinds of retail. And that's led me to the position I'm in now.
Did you guys just stay in one place in the GTA, or did you guys move around as well?
I bought my first home close to where I grew up in the latter part of my life in East York. I lived in an enclosed neighborhood called Parkview Hills, largely surrounded by a lot of my high school friends. Stayed there for about 10 years. Halfway through that, met my wife. Shared some time in a condo that she had in Liberty Village in downtown Toronto. And then my primary residence eventually became our matrimonial home, and that's where we had our first son. Shortly after having our son, we moved to where I reside now in North Toronto at Shepherd and Leslie.
Growing up, you had a number of interests and hobbies. One thing that caught my eye, though, was motorized vehicles. You didn't say cars. Why in particular motorized vehicles? Were you also a motorcycle fan?
Yeah, I was selective about my words when speaking about motorized vehicles because I got the bug really early, reflecting back on, we were fortunate enough to have a cottage. My parents got divorced really early in my life. And so I spent a lot of my summers with my dad at his cottage. I also had a cottage on my mom's side. My grandparents on my mom's side had a cottage, various cottages actually in the Kawarthas, but my dad's cottage it still is on Lake Simcoe, and I had various dirt bikes and a tinner aluminum boat before I eventually got my license 3 months before I was 16. I started taking driver training with the anticipation of the independence that getting my license would bring, and then was fortunate to have a car purchased for me by my dad with the agreement that I would have to take care of it. And that's basically what I worked for. I lived for that Jeep, worked in my part-time jobs, various jobs to pay for gas and insurance and operate the vehicle. And that was one of the earliest instances of me being fully responsible for something. And then my dad was in the car industry. My grandfather on my mom's side, my Guyanese grandfather was a mechanic by trade, and he was in the Navy and very mechanically inclined. And so from all angles, really, when my dad immigrated here from Argentina, eventually after Italy, when he came here at 16, about, I don't know, maybe 5 years after that, he landed a job at Ford, and then he spent his entire career managing parts departments at various Ford dealerships. So I was a dealership rat. I would go in and I would count inventory with him all the time. So I was happily around combustion engines and involving myself in them. We've had projects from as early as I can remember, starting with probably a 1947 Ford pickup truck that my dad had acquired, and we were set to restore together.
Was it one of those bubble ones, kind of the precursor to the F-150? Very round shape. You know what I'm talking about.
I know exactly what you're talking about. It was a precursor to that truck, probably the truck that you're thinking. You're probably referencing 1953 to 56 Ford F-100, which was absolutely the precursor to the Ford F-150. That truck is still on my bucket list. There's been a couple of times where I've tried to acquire one. And my better judgment has gotten a hold. I haven't, but I'm still after it, and I'm not calling it out yet.
You're a Ford family then?
Ford has part of my heart. I don't own any Ford vehicles right now. I do own a Chevy vehicle. It's my father's 1971 Stingray Corvette that I have in the garage.
Oh, geez, that is a beauty.
Yeah, after sleeping for 28 years, I decided to take it out of my Nona's garage, actually secretly one winter, and take it to a friend of mine's shop, tow it there, all in anticipation to gift it back to my dad with some service work and the ability to drive it. On January 8th, on his birthday. He shares the same birthday as Elvis did, as did his father as well, my grandfather. And so it quickly became apparent that we were going to miss that date. And so I eventually gave it to him for Father's Day. I picked him up. We went to a Paul Simon concert down at the Air Canada Centre. And then he gifted me the car right back. So it's been in my garage ever since.
And your family, you cite them as being the biggest influences in your life.
Absolutely, no doubt. I grew up with, in a very Brady Bunch-esque household. My Guyanese grandparents were always there every day. My grandparents were super active. My grandfather still may have a plaque in the Pickering Recreation Complex for going to the gym every day when he was 88 up until he passed. But they were very much a significant part of my life. And then when I moved with my Italian grandparents in and around 13, 14 and lived with them in East York, I would obviously see them every day as well. So significantly influenced by my family on all levels, for sure.
Would you say that your first job, I guess the first job where you got a T4 slip and a proper paycheck and deductions, was at McDonald's?
I think it was at McDonald's. It was either at McDonald's or like Food City. I always ran with a couple of jobs, and I would work them a couple days a week. I remember kind of lying about my age. I think it was my birthday that I lied about. So I stretched the truth a little bit to move, 5-6 months in my favor. And I was working at McDonald's at 13, if not just slightly before that. So it was at McDonald's, Pape and Cosburn, still there. I was super embarrassed because I worked in the back, and all my friends would come in at 11 o'clock and midnight after school dances, and when they were running around on the street, and that was kind of short-lived. I think it finally, my time there came to its demise after about 6 months, right when they started to charge us for meals, because back then, they had like the McDLT. We used to make up our own, chicken Big Macs and whatnot. And then they started charging us 50% for food. And so I think if I remember correctly, minimum wage was about $3.65 there. So charging half a rate for a combo meal was still quite expensive, and kind of did away with an hour's worth of wage. So that was enough for me to leave and move on.
Did you find the working world stressful at McDonald's? Because fast food can be very unforgiving.
I didn't find it too stressful. I was able to manage the grills and do that comfortably. I always most often found myself wanting more, especially when working in retail environments. I remember early on, I had other stints at collegiate sports, and I worked at Dairy, at Food City, at Maine and Danforth, and I just usually wanted more. I wanted more access to more departments, more hours, probably trying to get a higher wage, and open things up, to my favor a little bit more. So
Of those three jobs you just mentioned, McDonald's, Food City, and Collegiate, because they're all very different. I mean, you've got fast food, you've got grocery, and then you've got standard mall retail. Which one did you enjoy the most?
I have to say, from a friendship standpoint, Food City was incredible. Everybody was young. We had a great time. I recently told a story about the fact that we used to cook lobsters in garlic butter in the bread ovens. And
That's
you just
awesome.
Yeah, you just don't get times like that anymore. Egg fights in the dairy freezer, et cetera, et cetera. It was a pretty awesome time in my life. Then, working at Fairview at Collegiate Sports, which is no longer there, this was a big store. It was like a two-story store. I was
Oh,
working
I
in.
remember Collegiate Sports. Yeah, they were a big deal. Did Sport Check acquire them, or at least acquire their space?
They did. I think they were still running in Montreal and in French-speaking Canada for a while, with Sports Experts, under the Sports Experts moniker. But I think um, Fresani or Sports Check, in one of their iterations, bought Collegiate Sports, and that was the end of them. But that store at Fairview had to have closed about 25 years ago now, and now it's funny because the irony is that I live within walking distance to Fairview Mall. So a lot of nostalgia there for me.
Okay, so nothing in your early job career suggests getting into advertising. So what brought you towards creative advertising, and why did you pick Seneca College?
Funny story. I applied to three universities. I applied to Ryerson, U of T, and York. And I really didn't want to go to York because back then, like, every one of my friends was going to York, and it was just going to be a continuation of my high school. And so that's really not what I was after.
Okay, can I
Scarborough
stop you right
UFC.
there? Why didn't you want that continuation? Because when I was going to university, that was something that was attractive to me as well. I was going out and doing something different, but I had a lot of friends that wanted to stay together at a lot of the big schools and kind of continue what they had done in high school rather than hit the reboot button and start again making new friends.
I guess it's a good question. I guess because I had moved around a lot when I was a kid. My mom was in real estate, as I stated. My parents were divorced, so I had a great relationship in both situations when I lived with my mom and my dad, step parents involved, and a lot of love. But I did feel darkness particularly when moving from Durham, from Pickering to East York. I felt this dark cloud of, city kind of, passing my time in the city, and it was very different. You move from bush parties and having a lot of organic fun, making your own fun in Pickering, to weapons at school and big fights and all kinds of stuff that happened in East York, and so I think that world was bestowed upon me in East York. And although I always had a great circle of friends, many of whom I still see today, and call some of my best friends, I was really looking for a change at the end of high school because I was looking to maybe create my own identity and not, just kind of lean on this identity that I had created out of circumstance.
Do you think that helped you in your sales career, though? Because if you think about it, sales, we have to go around and we have to make friends with people. That's exactly what we do. And if you're consciously going to a new school where none of your friends are, you don't have that clique to, fall back on. So you are starting from scratch. And if you want to have friends and socialize, you've got to put your hand out and introduce yourself.
It may be an aspect of it. I've never looked at it that way before, but we're kind of at our place in our careers, we're kind of this combination of where we found comfort and leaning into our skill sets. I think that you may be right. I remember my mom when I was still living with my mom, her closing the door after we moved to, kicking me outside, telling me to move away from the television and go outside. It's a beautiful day. Go out and play. And me just sitting on the door and on the doorstep and always wondering why she was forcing me out of the house. Like, she's always seemed to be having this conversation with me about go out and make friends, go out and make friends. And often I remember resisting it, but somewhere down the line, I found some comfort in making friends and kind of asserting myself into situations, and I probably benefited from it because now I love it. I love that aspect of our business. I love the social side. So you're probably onto something.
So going back to the original question, York, U of T, and Ryerson were all on your radar. You wanted to pass on York for reasons we already discussed. What about U of T and Ryerson? And then how did you venture away from those two towards Seneca and creative advertising?
I thought U of T was a little too academic for my liking. It was also a little far for me to commute every day. And I just didn't feel it was the vibe that I wanted to pursue. And so ignorantly, I thought that I would get my way as I usually had in life. And I, threw caution to the wind, and I went to Europe for the summer without having my admittance to Ryerson yet. And I just thought I was going to get in. Back then, Ryerson was a shiny new school. It was focused on radio and television arts. It was the place to be for me, at least. Lo and behold, when I came back from Greece after spending a great time with my friends, I found out that I got a rejection letter and I was put on a waiting list for Ryerson. So I had nowhere to go. And so I called Seneca College and got a hold of administration and told a little white lie through my teeth. And I told them that I was on the waiting list and that they had told me that if I called back, on the 6th of September, at that point, classes had already started, by the way, by a day or two, that they would, have an answer for me as to whether or not I could enroll and join them for my studies. And so the receptionist said, the administration clerk said, well, if you can bring your money tomorrow, I'll tell you what, I'll let you in. And that was the end of that. I brought my money and I attended Seneca. It was great, actually. It worked out because it was a joint accreditation program between, you could do 2 years and get a college degree, or you could do 4 and get a combo university and college degree. I ended up not pursuing the university degree, but completed the creative studies course at Seneca and was off to the races.
And those races brought you back into the food service industry, but this kind of served as a gateway into advertising. So after graduation, why did you go back into the restaurant business, and why Gretzky's?
I was always working in restaurants because in and around when I was about 20 years old, I had a girlfriend who was 18 probably, and she went to Unionville High School. So she was my girlfriend for a long time. We were really close. I was close with her family, etc. So I would go pick her up often after school. And so I figured, why don't I get a job up there? So my first job in Markham, Richmond Hill was at White Rose at Highway on Yonge Street, just north of Highway 16.
You were
And I was
slinging
a
craft
yard
supplies?
manager. What's that?
White Rose? Isn't that the craft store?
Exactly. There you
You were
go.
slinging
Which brought
craft
me back to
supplies.
my youth.
Geez,
I
that in
was
collegiate
slinging.
sports, this is nostalgic.
It was awesome. So that job was a favorite of mine because I was driving for numerous reasons. But anyways, I ended up getting my girlfriend a job there at the time as well. But uh, the part that I loved about that job is I grew to manage the yard, and so I would be driving the forklift, and I would unload tractor trailers of trees and whatnot, and organize them. And it was great. It was great to be working outside, and it was a great time. Selling Christmas trees to people in the winter months. It was altogether just a blast. Then the time came where I was outgrowing that job. As I mentioned earlier, it tended to happen to me. It got the better of me eventually. So I saw that there was a Lone Star opening up right on the corner of 16th and Yonge. I didn't know anything about the restaurant, but I knew that they were opening up. It looked pretty exciting. It was a new concept that was coming to Canada. I thought that they had another location as well. So I applied there. I got a job as a busboy and then quickly set my sights on serving. So after that, I became a server at Lone Star. Uh, Another funny story. There were a lot of rules at Lone Star. So they would make you wear like white shoes that couldn't have any branding. Like you couldn't wear white Converse because if they had a red stripe around the sole, they would just get outlawed. And so really strict dress code, which was kind of waning on me. And then the final straw came to bear when the manager pulled us in for a pre-shift meeting, and he told us that on that night at 6:30 and at 8:30 at two different times, we are to break within our sections, and we're going to go into line dance formation. And it didn't matter what you were doing. We were to put on a show for the restaurant in the middle of the dining room and line dance for like whatever, a song or two. And I asked him if he was serious. He said yes, and I handed him my apron. And then I went down the street, got a job at Jack Astor's. That was way, way more fun. That was the spot to be at East Beaver Creek. They were on a 4-hour wait, that restaurant, and we were sending people to Rocky Mountain High to wait for their tables. And that was just a whole other level. So I served there for 4 years. I probably worked at Jack Astor's. It was amazing, much different than it is now. Earlier on in its infancy, I think it was just acquired by Surcorp at that time. Before that, it was run as an independent chain of very successful restaurants. I had the best general manager ever. Ann John is her name. Shout out to Ann John. I would love to see her today. She's an awesome human being. And then after that time elapsed, I moved down to Wayne Gretzky's restaurant and worked there for another 4 years.
And so how did that factor into you getting into advertising? Because wasn't there a meeting through someone who worked there or one of the customers there who brought you to Kathy Quinton?
Yeah, so Kathy Quinton, blast from the past. I was getting pretty distraught at this point. I was getting frustrated because it was 6 months post my studies. And again, I was getting that feeling, that discomfort around the collar, that I better get moving. And I had an ambition to do more with my life and felt I woke up one December morning and I felt really trapped, primarily because of the curator at Wayne Gretzky's at the time had told me, him and one other older individual told me at that time that they're just here for a short time. They're working on their masters, and they're going to be gone after that. And they were still there, years later. And so I said, this is going to be me. And really, I may have been okay with that, but the part that I wasn't okay with was when you're serving, you're working when other people are off. And so that was a huge problem to me, because one of these individuals had children, and they were, also pretty expressive about the fact that it interfered in their time spent with their children. So, because they had to go to work during evenings and whatnot as well. So this was really the problem that I was trying to solve, combined with the fact that I wanted to get started on my career. And so I reached out to Tim at the time, this family friend, who introduced me to Kathy Quinton, his girlfriend. And in the meantime, I put my resume together, and I was, interviewing at a bunch of places. Kathy quickly gave me an opportunity where she said, I'll bring you into Western International Media, sorry. And if you can give me a year's worth of service, you can come on board and enjoy your time here and learn the advertising business, media business. And I started 2 weeks later. I think it was December 21st. And it was a great gig.
And you started on a juggernaut of a client. What was it, Disney Home?
I started on a slew of clients. The first couple of days, they parked me beside Jeff Thibodeau. Who's, of course, an industry icon, as president of a division of Publicis. They parked me beside Jeff and said, Jeff, you're the best we got. Can you train this individual who is completely green in advertising and media buying and reconciliation? So they parked me beside Jeff and to stare at literally a black screen, because at that point we were working on MS-DOS. And so I had MS-DOS and flashing cursor and Excel spreadsheets and some printouts to look through, as well as the rate card book. What was that card? The
card.
Advertising rates and data online.
Weren't spreadsheets on DOS brutal? Like, were you using an old version of WordPerfect or the WordPerfect suite?
It was awful. I was using an old version of WordPerfect. It's funny. After I worked on that portfolio of clients, I eventually got tapped by Amanda Plowman at the time, who was VP on Disney Home Video, specifically because Carrie Hurd managed the Disney theatrical business. And so Amanda asked me if I wanted to come and work for her on Disney Home Video. And this was, of course, a super attractive position. I mean, how do you get bigger of a brand than Disney to work on? At that point, we were sharing time between the office at 175 Bloor Street East and down at 121 Simcoe. And the Disney offices were on the 29th floor. Everybody had an emulated desk of Walt's original desk of his drafting table. All the door handles were Mickey ears. They actually had a licensing vault with product in it, and it was pretty sexy. So I was having a good time.
Jesus, that's a far cry from where we work, that's for sure.
It is. It's a very far cry from where we work. It was a spectacular office. They literally had a Mickey porthole, when you came into the reception. So at that time, Disney had 4 production offices worldwide. One of them was in Toronto, one of them was in Tokyo, etc. So their offices were, fully decked out, and a great place to work. I actually had to, whenever we were hosting clients or guests in the boardroom, I actually had to get into a habit of putting my back towards the lake, because, of course, it was a clear shot to the lake, because you overshot the convention center and there was nothing else there. At this point, there were no condos, etc. And on a clear day, you could see Niagara Falls. So it was pretty appealing.
Okay, so everything's going pretty well then with your agency career, and then you decide to make the jump to sales. So I guess my two questions are, why Astral Media and why pivot into sales?
I always had a desire to get into sales. I thought it would be a good place for me to be. And I'll never forget that I was working for Disney. And the thing about Disney, it was a time when many of us wanted to work for the brands that we wanted to work for. We wanted to work for Nike or CTV or Disney or whoever. But being early on in our career, we weren't getting compensated in the way we that would line up to, I think, how we perceived those positions to be. I
That is a
at
very
least
diplomatic way of putting it.
Yeah, I at least thought that, oh, great, I'll go work at Nike. It'll be great. They'll give me shoes and I'll get to, be involved in decision making, and I'll, grow to be an executive, and I'll be compensated in that way, etc. But very much, very different actually than how it happens now in a career trajectory standpoint, because nowadays individuals, stay for a year or two. Two is a pretty long time before asking for additional remuneration or a position increase, or even jumping for $10,000. Back then, it was like a unwritten rule that, and any mentor or friend would tell you that, like, yeah, you don't move for like $10,000. Your happiness is way more valuable than that. And even reflecting back on that, like, I started in the industry for $18,000. And so when I finished working 4.5 years later at Disney, I was making distinctly, I remember I was making $44,000. And it was at one point where my CBS out of home company representative gave me her family tickets because her husband was the chair of the Hamilton Tiger Cats. So they had Leafs tickets. So they gave me 4 tickets to the Leafs game. And I looked at her and I looked at the tickets and I said, "Are you serious?" And she said, "Yeah, these are our personal tickets. Like, take all 4." And I looked down at the tickets and they were $350 a pop. And so I took 3 friends. We had a great time. It was like center ice, platinums, like 12 rows up behind the bench. Great time. But what I was reflecting on after the game immediately was the fact that I could never afford these tickets. They're like, the night was like $2,000. There's no way I could spend that much money on hosting my friends, and I wanted to start to make those decisions to be able to take my girlfriend or friends out and experience that on my own, under my own dime. And so that's what really immediately drove me at that point to turn the page on Disney after all of the great experiences I had with them, together with one other aspect that I'm leaving out that's pretty interesting. And then I had a plethora of options to go from, because to call upon, because when working for Disney and buying media for Disney, we had an abundance of cash for each plan. So, if we're launching Toy Story 2, we might have a $2 million budget to amortize over a 6-week flight. So it was a lot of money. Conversely, I remember working on IMAX and trying to manage a $400,000 budget for the entire year across 11 films. So, and appease all of the different theaters, which were geographically far from each other. So, so it was, so I eventually reached out to Peter Bartram at the time, who was running Astral out of home. They were coincidentally looking to shift the Dorval and Mirabel Montreal out of home airport, out of home representation from Montreal to Toronto, because they believed that 80% of the blue chip clients were bought out of Toronto. And that happened to be the case. And so I joined that team to sell Mirabel and Dorval Airport advertising out of the Toronto market for a year and a half until September 11th.
And what happened after that? Like, I imagine that had a massive impact on your business.
September 11th, on the day, I was in Mount Tremblant in a all staff conference with my Astral team. It was being presented in French. I, after tiring of hearing the entire lecture in French and picking up on probably 60% of what they were saying, I decided to go to the washroom for a second and leave the conference room and go out for some fresh air. At this point, there was a 13-inch tube television in the lobby, just kind of like beside some, cigar chairs in the lobby lounge, and there was probably 40 people around this little 13-inch tube television, some of whom were crying when I walked out of the conference room. And so I quickly came to terms with the fact that one plane had hit the first building at that point, and there was another plane in the air, and it looked like it was going to hit the second building. My colleague, Joe Back, his brother-in-law, was on the 84th floor of the second building. He was crying profusely. I immediately started calling car rental companies because I had to drive him back to Toronto so that he could console his sister and his wife and everyone that was involved with this tragedy. Rental cars were sold out. I eventually drove him back, got pulled over for speeding. The police officer let us off because of everything that we were going through. And then after that, air travel went from very respectable numbers to zero, literally zero. People believed that teleconferencing was the way to the future as far as business travel was concerned. And VPs of media and the clients that I were calling for, these blue chip clients were literally telling me, they were swearing at me, telling me that I'm unethical and how could I be selling airport advertising in this circumstance. And so I left probably 4 or 5 weeks after that.
Jesus. Well, that was wow. I mean, everyone's got a story about how it impacts them, but my God, how it impacted you both personally and professionally simultaneously. And then after, how people were coming after you saying, how can you be trying to sell airport advertising? Because you're just doing your job at this point. Like, you're not being insensitive. You're still trying to keep a roof over your head. So you said you made the decision to leave about 4 or 5 weeks after that. And then you landed at Alliance Atlantis. And so tell us what attracted you to going to Alliance Atlantis. And you made a really big pivot here, because we're talking about going from agency life to out-of-home media, and now you're going to be an integrated rep. So I imagine this was broadcast at the center of it, but what other platforms were pulled in?
Yeah, great segue. So at the time, it was a division called, I don't think it was called Synergy yet. I think it was called Marketing Solutions. Or integrated marketing. And so I went to interview with Alliance Atlantis. I interviewed at that time with Brian Press, Errol DeRay, and Brad Allis, who were the 3 most senior executives. Prior to that, the job was to report into Nancy Stern, who was like the VP of integrated programs. And so really at that point, it was about building microsites, contests, assembling components of integrated marketing campaigns and selling them through to clients, and then fulfilling and delivering on all of those components. And so early on, it was things like Debbie Travis's show, calling Tetley Tea and selling them into a created spot for them where I budgeted for the production and brought on the clients, hired talent, etc., and managed that whole presentation, the fulfillment of the spot, the creation of the spot, the put it together and ran a campaign tied to media weight. perhaps with a contest, etc. And so that took me, that kind of unlocked the creative side of my brain. It was really, I guess, the reason why I gravitated towards that because earlier on, one aspect that I didn't talk about was when I came out of Seneca, I had a portfolio, and I was lucky enough to get some FaceTime with Jeffrey Roche, who was, iconic at the time in our industry. It was at Young and Eglinton. I went to his office, and I showed him my portfolio, and he said, "Well, this is great. What do you want to do with your career?" And so I said, "I want to be a creative suit." And he looked at my portfolio, went through it. He literally took a Sharpie and kind of crossed stuff out. He said, extract this, extract this, extract this. And he said, "Come back when your portfolio's tightened." And he said, "As per this creative suit, this role doesn't exist in our industry. So give your head a shake. And when you come back with your revised portfolio, come back with a refreshed idea of where you want to go in your career, and I'll see if I can help you out." Needless to say, I was distraught. It didn't last long. I was distraught for a day, but I thought hard about what he said, and at that point, I challenged him because his thinking, because I believed that the future was going to have an opportunity for creative suits or creative salespeople, and that kind of, I guess, opened my thinking to Alliance Atlantis in that integrated programs role, and it really stuck with me throughout the entirety of my career.
When you got into this creative role, how did you find the process of putting together one of those pitches and seeing it through the integrated pitch or the product placement or the custom spot that you cited versus something that was a lot more transactional back at Astral, where it's we have the real estate already, here's what the specs are, take it or leave it or move on to the next client? Because I've worked on both sides like you have, and my God, when you get into the creative side of the business and you're dealing with all the different variables, it can be incredibly stressful. I mean, I kind of call it a cold shower the first time, but you need a cold shower after you go through your first pitch and get your first campaign sorted. Do you find it stressful?
Indeed, I did. I think you hit the nail on the head with that. So many things were stressful about that side of the business. There's so many elements that you couldn't have answers to, that you had to improvise and answer on the fly, bend, stretch, mold into a solution that you believed would fit both, the client objectives, your corporate objectives, the budget, all kinds of things. So yeah, I remember it being hugely stressful, together with the fact that, you're printing out 80-page colored decks on
Yes.
on a small printer. It's taking you 4 hours to print 5 decks, and then you can get something wrong, and so you have to do all of that work as well. So the technology definitely wasn't where we needed it to be. It was very piecemealed, but to get the creative juices flowing, and the reward was more valuable than the risk and pain points to get there.
See, the reward, you hit the nail on the head with that one, because unlike transactional media, where if you call up a website and you go, "Oh, that big box, I sold it," that's not as impressive to, I guess, friends and family that aren't in the industry than pointing out something that's on television or product integration and a program going, "That's there because of me," or a contest put together from start to finish.
You're completely accurate in that. I remember I moved through about 4 or 5 positions with Disney Home Video, and I moved from, when I started, I was assembling radio programs and calling up DJs or radio hosts in Red Deer, and giving them a script to give away 10 early copies of The Avengers or whatever show we were promoting, whatever film we were promoting. And then, it grew to one of the last programs I did there, where I met Heather Gordon and Randy Moskoff and Jessica Edwards and a bunch of people that are still friends of mine in the industry. Heather, who I now compete against in audio, but still a good friend. Was a Gone in 60 Seconds program where, we enlisted like Rick the Temp and Much Music, and we did a nationwide VJ search, and we were going to award this individual with not only a contract to be a Much Music VJ, but we were going to give them a brand new Mustang and some cash and all kinds of stuff to celebrate the launch of this film. And if you think back to some of the earlier things that we discussed about my personal interests tied to cars, you would know that I was a fan of Gone in 60 Seconds, very much so. Not for the acting, but for the automotive nostalgia that the film featured. And so just bridging those worlds and getting to do that, and you're right, you hit it right on, with conveying that to your friends or family, or even to yourself, that you had a small part to do with putting all of that together and executing it, was really a huge reward.
Okay, have you seen the old Gone in 60 Seconds? The original?
I have.
Okay, not to get sidetracked, but have you ever read up on the behind the scenes of the massive chasing at the end, revolving around, I don't even know if they call it Eleanor. It's been a while since I've seen that movie, but basically the Mustang.
No, the Bullet.
The fastback. It was the Bullet, yes. The Bullet Mustang. Yep. Apparently, they did not have permits to film. So what they used to do is send crew guys ahead, and the guys would just kind of go out there and stop traffic, radio to the stunt driver, and the stunt driver would blow through the intersection. The cameraman would already be there capturing it. Then they'd all pile into the car before anyone was, wise to what was happening, and go on to the next spot. It's brilliant. I love stories like that. Unlike what we've got now, where everything's very polished, usually done on a green screen. Sorry, I'm just getting sidetracked because we don't make movies like that anymore.
No, we definitely don't. And that was an era of Steve McQueen and Bruce Lee and Jackie Chan and
Paul Newman. We got to throw Paul Newman. If we're talking about car guys, Paul Newman's got to be in there. James Gardner as well. We got winnings. We've got Grand Prix in there. You've got Le Mans. A lot of great, and Gone in 60 Seconds, like you mentioned, a lot of great car films in there.
I think it's interesting. I think it's an interesting point to bring up. I just heard that Paul Newman's original Daytona, race-winning Daytona that has it etched on the back, his Rolex, sold at auction, I think it was 2 years ago, for $17 million. And so now his family has found two more conveniently. And his wife was like, wow, geez, if I knew that, his memorabilia, his personal items would sell for that much money, then, here, you can lean into my whole drawer of sunglasses and Rolexes and whatnot. So there's two other watches that have just surfaced. Similar watches, Daytona Rolexes, and they're not going to command the same value. But getting back to my point, this was because people were authentic, and they did the unthinkable, they accomplished the unimaginable, did their own stunts, and now it's easier to do that. There's benefits to that because access to content creation has definitely never been easier at this point, but there's something to be said for that old nostalgic, gritty, one time to film it scenarios as well.
So what brought you back to Out of Home and Astral as well? Because after doing everything you had done to indulge your creative side for 9 years at Alliance Atlantis, it was kind of a bit of a homecoming, or I guess I would even say an unexpected homecoming.
Interesting thing. So my tenure at Alliance Atlantis was almost evenly divided between what we'll call marketing solutions and a straight, dollar a holler TV spots. And I don't mean to diminish that responsibility of broadcast salespeople, and so I won't. But a lot of high volume contracts, locking yourself in an office, working through 171 Reckitt Benckiser orders, and it's just like putting allocating commercial airtime into shows is not as creative as the other side, where I spent the earlier half of my career. But going into that, Brian Press, I'll never forget this, said to me, he said, I almost don't want to give you this role because you're going to be bored. Moving into broadcast sales is not going to be good for you. And I said, I have a feeling that you're right, but I have to do it for my career. I want to understand how to manage like a big territory, high scale, high volume territory. And so I went to do that. But then shortly thereafter, the CanWest acquisition, a lot changed. The job got more monotonous. We were in a situation where we kind of had a reverse takeover. We grew that Alliance Atlantis business from $29 million when I started to $245 million. Hardly anyone left. We went on a bunch of sales incentive trips, and we were a tight-knit group. And so when the smaller CanWest Global bought us, it changed the entire culture of our organization. And so I stayed on for a year after that, and then eventually said, I have to go kind of explore other aspects of this business and move on. So in between that time when I was looking to leave Alliance Atlantis, when I was at 121 Bloor, and go back to figure out what else I was going to do, I about 2 years prior, through a friend of ours, I had asked Matthew Corin, the founder of Lettuce Eatery at the time, which is now Freshii, if he was interested. I went to go speak to him at the Bloor location, which was seeing 2-hour lineups every lunch. And I asked him if he would, I asked him about his story to success and how he created this brand. And I asked him if he was interested in franchising. He said, no, not at the time, but give me your number and I'll give you a call if I do. And so 2 years later, he gave me a call. I was so impressed that he still had my name and number. I embarked on this journey with him, and eventually it led me to creating a business plan and becoming the first global franchisee of Freshii. And so it was at that point that I remember going back to Astral, and this isn't a knock on Astral. It's just I'll just say it like it is. I decided to move forward with Freshii and embark on this business journey, and hopefully that would lead me to having 3 locations, because I had first right of refusal on York University and Yorkdale Food Court, and so I had always planned to open up those 3 locations, and I would go back to selling 10 by 20s and transit shelters with and digital boards at the time, because they were just being launched at Astral. For 2 different reasons. One, because it was very familiar to me, and I knew that I was good at it. It wouldn't have any learning curve, and I was kind of like leaning into the comfort while I moonlit and built out this business and managed this business as well for the Freshii location at College Park. And then 2, secretly, if we move all the way back to when I was first at Astral, at my first time in sales, I was begging them for the ability to sell murals and 10 by 20s. And at the time, I'm not sure if they had transit shelters, but I wanted to sell the full product portfolio, and they would not let me. They kept telling me consistently, Ryan, we need you to focus on airports. And so I secretly wanted access to see what I could do with all of those products. And so I went back to sell at the whole gamut of out-of-home products at Astral.
Okay, so where did you find the time to balance Astral and being a franchise owner?
It was tough. I was dating Josie, my wife now. I was dating her at the time in a mid to long-term relationship with her. She was an ex-Alliance Atlantis employee as well, on the operational side and in TV production. And so she was very strong operationally. So I had her, and she would run the operational side of the business. She agreed to embark on this journey with me, and invest and build out this business. And then I just straight up moonlit. I hired a manager, so I always had a general manager at Freshii. We hired an experienced general manager to kick things off, and then we moved to an inexperienced, more entrepreneurial manager for the second half of our ownership. And then they managed and I managed them. So I had one person to manage and the business, and that included inventory and the P&L and finances and stock and all of that, and any problems that arose during the day. And Josie helped me manage the books. We had a bookkeeper, and so it was busy, but we didn't have any children at that point, so I knew that I wanted to utilize my time effectively, and I didn't care if I had to work till 1 o'clock in the morning every day. I could do it.
Was it like riding a bike, given your experience in the restaurant business?
No, I think that it was like not knowing how to ride a bike and being incredibly frustrated because you were falling off all the time, and you're like, what happened? I know how to ride a bike, and why can't I ride a bike anymore? And my left foot's just not working. And I say that because there were all kinds of things going on at that point. It was from thinking about in disbelief as to why we had such a loss problem. Are the employees really stealing bags of shrimp or frozen salmon pieces? Probably they're going somewhere. To trying tactics to have your friends or family go to the store with a marked $50 bill and seeing if that's in the till at the end of the day. All kinds of problems, you name it. Your manager calling in sick. Like, what do you do? I'm an account executive at Astro selling billboards, and my manager called in sick 10 stops down the subway line from me, and here it is. Here is our business floundering at College Park, and what to do. The company used to put ice shielding up every year. It decimated our business, 40 to 60% business decline. The G20 summit came into town. There were riots. They were right in front of my location because the police station was in front of that. So they put up, if you remember, they put up that 20-foot cage fencing.
I worked at CBC at that time, and we had to work from home because we were going to be inside that cage.
Yeah. So it's like, we literally, our location overlooked the police head office on College Street. So all kinds of things, you name it, like things to deal with. It was just incredible. But it, again, taught me how to run a P&L, taught me the nuances of watching, every aspect, line item of a P&L, because it's also not okay to make, 25% margins 1 month and -8 the next. It just doesn't work that way.
Your time at Rogers, you were the manager of emerging platforms. I've had exposure to people who have those titles or who've done those jobs at other companies. And the consensus I get from speaking with them is that it's fun because you get to try the new technology before anyone else, but there's a chance that some stuff will take off, some stuff is going to flounder and will be forgotten very quickly. But all in all, you're trying to do a lot of internal selling to let people know this is a big deal and we need to pay attention to it. Did you find that was part of your role at Rogers, or a challenge that you had?
Very much so. So you put it so eloquently. My time as manager of emerging platforms for RAP TV, Rogers Anyplace TV, which kind of paved the way for Show Me.
Which, by the way, was the worst acronym ever. I'm sorry. I was at Rogers when they were doing that too. And I was just like any place, like, come on, just give it a better name. Now we probably call it Rogers Plus.
Yeah, it was like Rap TV. I can't remember what it was before. It was crazy.
There was also Rogers On Demand Online. I'm just like, the acronyms were just way too long.
Yeah, exactly. So The fun parts about that responsibility was that I very much worked for an incubator. I was that incubator was stationed out of 350 Bloor, which was a Rogers building that I think they probably own, but that Rogers like home and alarm kind of those businesses were out of there. I can't remember what the home selling app is, but that business was out of there. And then, of course, across the street was One Mount Pleasant, where all the corporate executives sat, and Ted and Edward sat, as did wireless. And then down the street to, or sorry, 333 was across the street, and then OMP, One Mount Pleasant. So I loved that I had autonomy. I was an employee of digital ad sales on loan to the to be the manager of emerging platforms for David Purdy's group, who was in charge of content creation, production, and monetization. And so that was really the gateway to the Anyplace TV incubator. It was always run by some of the brightest minds. Consecutively, like 4 Boston Consultant Group leaders ran that, and they've since gone on to hold significant posts at Google and global Amazon roles, etc. So really, really smart, talented people. Lara Skripitsky, who is the Chief Digital Officer of McDonald's, Technology Officer of McDonald's, was my boss for a little bit. And then I also had the flexibility and enjoyment to go back home, so to speak, and be part of digital ad sales as well. So that was great. It was great to have peers and the autonomy as well, which was unusual at Rogers for sure.
How much did that prepare you for your next role at Videology? Because here you are, and this is your very first sales job where you're not working for a big brand, a well-known brand, because this is a company coming over the border, and you have to, not only do you have to be a sales leader, but you have to be a bit of a cheerleader for the brand. And you have to kind of warm people up to the Videology brand and what you can do.
It's funny because just realizing this now, yes, I had the Rogers, big red machine branding behind me when selling Anyplace TV, but that was like a real tough sell. People didn't understand it then. They didn't understand AVOD. The incubator didn't understand that you had to, you needed audiences that were legitimate audiences in order to have something to sell. They just didn't get ad sales and monetization. They were concerned with the carousel of products and how they would show up in front of users and retention and all that stuff. So there was a disconnect there. But one thing was clear was that I loved video. I just loved the sight, sound, and motion of video. I loved it from Alliance Atlantis. I loved it at Rogers. I loved it at Disney. And so that was a common thread throughout the entirety of my career. And that led me to this video technology DSP back in 2012, when there weren't really any around to compare it to. Like, what is this? Like, explain it to me again. So you're talking about, a technology partner that would take all of this anonymized inventory, like we were trying to sell and monetize on Anyplace TV, and aggregate that, serve that up to advertising agencies, and tie data to it and decision based on it. Oh, this is pretty cool. So I was attracted to the video side of it and the monetization and the creative adaptation more than I was the technology side. But then that pulled me into ad tech, and the rest is history.
Well, and your ad tech experience only grew from there. Like, what brought you to GumGum? Did you find the role, or did the role find you?
GumGum was a company that the previous leader of the Midwest, managing out of Chicago, I had some experience with, and he was SVP Neil Ford of the US Midwest and Canada at the time. Him and I had been having conversations earlier on, and he came to me about midway point at Videology. And I said, look, Neil, like I would love to come work with you. I think that you're at a good spot at Gum Gum, but I'm just not finished delivering on my strategy for Videology. I just signed this Group M exclusive video partnership, and I was excited to see that through. And then, a couple of years later, I was, I had delivered on my strategy, and I was looking for something new. Towards the tail end of Videology, Videology was running into momentum problems. We had done away with our display product, which I didn't really agree with. Like, why wouldn't you keep that moving? And so we were just running into hiccups. There were technology glitches, product roadmap failures, and so it was time to move on. So I had a new conversation with Neil Ford, and at that time, timing lined up. I thought that Gum Gum was an incredible tool set with 40 patents in image recognition, and I believed in computer vision and thought that it was the future.
And from there, you moved on to Media Monks, and you were their SVP of growth. Just explain to us what Media Monks is first and foremost, because I believe you were there. Were you there when it was still called Mighty Hive, or were you there when it was Media Monks? Because I know that they did a bit of a rebrand. I think it was during the pandemic, or maybe before the pandemic.
Yeah, so I joined Media Monks in September of 2020, I think. So you're spot on. It was right in the middle of the pandemic. It was Mighty Hive and Media Monks as two separate entities. The Mighty Hive brand had existed in Canada, and they were a data and analytics and software solutions company, really focused on in-housing for clients and setting them up for success from a talent perspective, and really kind of bringing this new business strategy to the forefront of allowing and enabling brands to make these decisions and set up these internal divisions themselves and help them out with it. And after they were done their consultant work, they would kind of move on to the next or pick up other projects for these brands, and that was their business. Media Monks was an entirely different division. This was like content creation at the highest scale, filming the NBA in VR, creating Mission Impossible, feature film commercials, all kinds of things, all the way down to spots and dots and scaling assets at scale for some of the world's biggest brands in Nike and BMW and whatnot. Really, really interesting company. I jumped on board as a senior growth lead in North America, and my job was to, as these two brands collided, these two businesses collided, Mighty Hive and Media Monks, and eventually became Media Monks. It was really this fusion of this data and analytics and onboarding in-housing business together with assets at scale, asset management platforms, SEO, SEM solutions, all kinds of things, DAMs. And really, they were embarking on this journey to move forward in one entity that could handle all of your solutions from a consultant standpoint. And so we were set out to manage global clients and seek global opportunities and manage those businesses from North America. And so I managed some LG business. I was part of the team that won and was awarded the Tim Hortons digital business. I worked on some Canadian Olympic business, et cetera, et cetera. And so my time there was short, but it was super fast paced. And yeah, I had a great time with and learned a ton.
How was it being an SVP of a company during the pandemic? Because like you said, this was the fall of 2020. So we were still at a point where there was no vaccine. We were still very paranoid about the effects of COVID. everyone was paying attention to just the number of hospitalizations, the daily numbers that came up, along with the number of deaths. So how did you kind of fit into that role versus, say, being a sales leader at a company where you had an office and you went into and got to see your peers on a regular basis?
Yeah, it was great. I had some benefits there, like Tessa. I had known for quite some time as being, from being a client and friend in the industry.
We're talking about Tessa Ollendorf?
It's Tessa Ollendorf, who
A
is
guest of
now
this podcast.
the managing director. She's a spectacular person, and I've always been a fan. And so she, she presented the opportunity for me to come on board. She made things very comfortable. She is a leader of her people and exceptional at that. So there was always comfort around that. We were working out of a WeWork space just outside of Liberty Village there. So, we could come and go, and she made sure that everybody was comfortable in that regard. I didn't have any direct reports, and I reported into New York as head of growth. Eventually reported into New York. Prior to that, my boss was out of Utah, I think, or Nebraska. So I never met my bosses beyond Tessa. Had a strong working relationship with the team here, and really didn't struggle too much. It was a struggle to drum up business because if you remember, I'm working on international brands. So like as part of the LG team, my team members are in Vermont, California, and Brazil, maybe, so we're lining up times to strategize and get on calls with clients and kind of like develop work for them, and some of that was difficult, but all in all, Media Monks does an exceptional job of bringing subject matter experts together regardless of where they're located, and solving for the client in the strongest way possible. And so I don't think that was a problem. I think that it was a benefit from during COVID, and I think it's still a benefit that these new companies, them and some of their competitors, have benefited from the borderless nature of it today.
Okay, so looking back at your career, DAX seemed to be the one area that you had not covered, which is audio. You've got video, you've got analog video, or I guess you could say traditional or broadcast versus digital video, programmatic. You've done out of home, creative, transactional media. So what brought you to DAX? Was that a box you were looking to check?
I've always looked at my career, and especially earlier on, as like a Trivial Pursuit pie. And, I got to get green. I don't have green. How am I going to get green? Can I get orange and then green? Okay, fine. So, and what I mean by that is like, I never wanted to get into a conversation where an potential employer said, you don't have people leadership experience. You don't have P&L experience. You've never opened an office. And so within that came experience in a well-rounded plethora of media channels as well. And so that really, completed my ambition to try something new and be enticed by the creativity of audio. Like, I love audio. I'm an audiophile. It makes me feel it boosts my mood. I intentionally pull myself up or bring myself down if I want to kind of enter into other states. I amplify my mood through some walk-on music, if you would, if I'm looking to charge myself up, and it's just a very complementary medium to everything that I like about the sound and motion aspect of sight, sound, and motion. And I think that I'm enticed by its future growth potential that it's undoubtedly going to see.
Okay, before you go into a big sales pitch or a really big meeting that you're going to be leading, similar to how athletes play songs to get them fired up before a game, is there a song that you play for yourself to get you fired up for the meeting?
No, I just saw a meme that was pretty funny and pretty accurate for me about that friend that listens to like all genres of music. That's me, for good or bad. One consistent amplification, kind of like personal feeling um, playlist that I listen to is The Last Waltz. I just like that compilation of. I'm pretty old school in my in and nostalgic in my likes in general. Like I love cars from the late '60s. I love music from the late '60s. My birth year is '74, and so I love music from that era. Um, I'm just really drawn to that. And so The Last Waltz really does it for me. If I'm home alone without the family and I want to blast some tunes and just kind of feel my way through how I'm feeling or think about something, I got to say it's The Last Waltz that I put on.
Okay, we're going to learn a little bit more about you. So are you ready for rapid fire questions?
Absolutely.
Okay, Ryan, the campaign you are most proud of.
Probably Gone in 60 Seconds, because now that my son is getting to be into automobilia, I would love to take him through what I conceptualized and executed for that campaign. It's pretty cool, and he'll get it now at 11.
Your favorite movie?
True Romance, I gotta say, I feel.
If Hollywood were to make a movie based on your life story, who would you want to play you?
Ralph Macchio, maybe? I don't know. Al Pacino, a younger Al Pacino?
My follow-up question to that, if Hollywood were to make that movie based on your life story, what would you call it?
Down and Out in Beverly Hills is Taken. I would have to go with Fast Times Forgotten.
Your favorite book?
Not getting to do a lot of reading these days, but during my time at Disney, I was a huge Bob Iger fan, and so just to see him and what he's done, the ride of a lifetime is something that I'm going to revisit right now. I love that he came back. I'm rooting for him for sure.
Your favorite song?
Don't have one. Favorite? No way.
It's like asking you to
Like
pick
too
your
many.
favorite child.
Yeah, exactly.
The best advice you have ever received.
Work with your mind and not with your hands. That is something that my dad would always say to me. But following up with that, I'm so happy to be able to um, be self-sufficient from not being reliant on people to do basic tasks. I'm almost up for anything, so I love that side of it as well.
My signature closing question, if you weren't in media, what would you be doing and why?
Probably own a car dealership and selling cars. I think that it's super attractive. I think that it's only gotten more innovative, and I love to see what's going on in the space. I think it's amazing.
So what brand would you pick for your dealership?
If I was picking a singular brand, it would be Porsche. I think that they, laterally have the best product mix across the board. I think that they also, strike that sweet spot of being reliable and presenting good value, although their products are quite expensive now. But they've answered the entry level side of things pretty strongly in with the Macan. They've entered into the electrification world very admirably. And I think that I think that they still have some surprises left up their sleeve. And I love the ownership group.
Here's an interesting fact about Porsche. I don't know if this still holds true today, but we're going back about 20 years with this story. My friends and I were at Mosport for the American Le Mans Series race. I think it was in 2002. And one of my friends was going through a Datsun phase. And we were talking to a couple of guys there that had Porsches and Datsuns, and they would use them for track days. And the
Yeah.
Datsun was a far cheaper car to acquire than the Porsches. But when we were talking to them, they said the Porsches were far cheaper to maintain. Apparently, when they make the parts, they make sure they're backwards compatible. So there's no shortage of parts for the Porsches over time, whereas with the Datsun, they were usually on special order, and you had to pay through the nose for them.
That's amazing. That's an amazing tidbit. I would believe it. That comes into the part sharing. Look at what they've done with Datsun really hasn't. They've, restricted the brand to, staying to itself. Whereas Porsche, there's many cross collabs with Audi and Volkswagen, et cetera, and now Lamborghini, that they just kind of like, are sharing parts across the board.
Ryan, this has been fantastic. We could keep going about cars, but we're going to end it here. Thank you so much for your time.
Thank you very much, Victor. It's been a pleasure. Well, we're going to have to get together and watch some F1 races this year, and I'll see you then.
That's it for today's show. For more episodes, you can go to mediapeople.ca or subscribe wherever you get podcasts. And don't forget to follow me on Instagram @VicGenova.